The chairman of the Federal Reserve recently announced that 40% of Americans earning less than $40,000 a year lost their job in March. Textbook example of the income inequality that coronavirus has, of course, magnified.
Author Joel Kotkin, he's warning of a global return to feudalism. He writes that the coming neo-feudalism will consist of the so-called clerical elite and the tech oligarchs at the top. Everyone else falls well below them. Joel is also an Urban Futures Fellow at Chapman University. He joins us now live via Zoom, I believe. It's great to see you, Joel. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you.
Absolutely. Joel, tell us, it's a very provocative title. It's a provocative thesis. Tells us what brings you to such a dire conclusion about American society.
Well, it's more than American society. It's something we're seeing around the world. And this, by the way, this was written before COVID. COVID has revealed in a funny way how far along we are in this process of, if you will, feudalization. Because what it's done is it's elevated the power, particularly of the tech oligarchy, whose stocks are going up. Jeff Bezos, this is, I'm sure Jeff would never say he was happy about it, but, this has made Amazon's growth even more spectacular. And then you have the growth of, well, we're on Zoom, all these different technological advances that are now being used more and more. And you have a greater power in what we might call the clerisy in the book, which is, the intellectual elites, the media, people like that. Then you have the two groups that are being really screwed. One is what I call the yeomanry, the middle class, the small property owners. Sometimes you go down shopping streets, not just in New York, but in other places here in California as well, and it looks like a bomb hit. It's unbelievable, the emptiness, all the lives that are being destroyed. I've been doing interviews in South Los Angeles and East Los Angeles, and there, those small immigrant entrepreneurs who were so inspirational to many of us are really being wiped out. So I think that you really have to look at that effect. And then the last part is the people who used to go into the middle class, let's say our children, who are now having to work at very low-end jobs, sometimes in danger, and are among the groups that have lost their jobs. The young people are having a hard time starting businesses, finding employment, or ever buying a house. And that's why you have what used to be a middle class becoming more and more of a serf class, which will never own property.
Dig into that a little more, because I know you're laying out this is really more of an almost global phenomenon. But in the American context, so much of our national self-conception is built around this idea of the American dream. No matter where you start off, the idealized conception is that you can end up as one of those tech oligarchs one day.
Right.
So what you're arguing here is basically that these classes are becoming hardened, where if you start out as in the serf class, as you put it, that's where you're going to end up.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. The whole Horatio Alger story, which is so essential to the American character, has been fading over the last 10 to 20 years. And so what you find is that people feel that this aspiration doesn't exist anymore. And that really will change our politics. You get the politics of resentment. People feel that the government cost them the job. Others who feel that corporations have lost their jobs. We're going into, I think, what will be a very, both a period in which we could make real reforms, or a period in which there is really serious social dislocation. You can't have neighborhoods as, East LA, South LA, large parts of New York City, where there's mass unemployment. There's no hope of ever starting a business. The only businesses left are chain stores. That is a recipe for social dislocation of a major extent. And we have to confront this now. We can't allow the entire middle class of America to slide into serfdom.
And so, Joel, what I like about what you're saying and what you've written about in the past is about how this doesn't cut along partisan lines. It's that it's a bipartisan phenomenon, really. So what do we do about it, Joel? What do you think is a way to stop neo-feudalism from taking part? Or are we just so far down that path that it seems inevitable?
Oh, well, there are still things we can do. There are many things I wish, for instance, that President Trump had started with the idea of infrastructure building. When we look about how we face these things, let's say at the turn of the last century, we had antitrust laws. So, for instance, we shouldn't have allowed Facebook to buy Instagram, allowing 4, 5, 6 different companies to dominate our media, our culture, our technology. That is something that could be stopped with, let's say, antitrust policy. And in some cases, some of these companies should probably be regulated like utilities. They're just 21st century utilities, not the Bell company. I think we can do things to bring manufacturing back to America. I mean, many of the promises that were made by President Trump and to some extent by candidates like Bernie Sanders, I wish that they had taken them seriously, or that the political climate would allow for this to happen. What we're getting right now is the exact opposite: a stimulus plan that helps the rich get richer and does very little for the middle class, and then consigns everybody else to what Marx called the proletarian almshouse.
And so I know that the book was written before COVID, but certainly seems very prescient now, and as you put it, has revealed a lot of the dynamics that you lay out in the book. How do you think that COVID will accelerate these dynamics? What are we going to see on the other side?
Well, okay, first of all, it's making life very, very difficult to people at the bottom. So if you're already at the bottom of the income ladder, your chance of going up is fairly limited. Tragically, what is happening to small business? 30 million are shuttered. Many of them will never open up, particularly things like restaurants, which means that fundamentally we've wiped out the middle class. What I hear from people, whether they're in South LA or Orange County or Houston or wherever I've been talking to people, what they fear is that after this, when the businesses are gone and the small property owners have been wiped out, Wall Street and the big chains will come in and just take everything. So this will accelerate feudalism to a great extent, because the real basis of democracy, whether it was in ancient Athens or ancient Rome or the Netherlands in the 17th century, always based on a class of small property owners, and that's being wiped out. Meanwhile, government workers are being paid. They seem to be doing well. The Democrats seem to be obsessed with helping them, and so you have that group that has actually benefited. And then at the top, the tech oligarchs. If you wanted to create a ideal formula for their complete takeover of the society, we came up with one.
Yeah, well, very well said, Joel.
Joel,
appreciate you joining us.
Really interesting stuff. People need to check out the book.
Please buy the book,
so much.
everybody. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Our pleasure. All right, more Rising for you after this.